Hey Brian, how old are you going to be?
35.
Well, I would tell you to act your age, but I'm afraid you'd kill over dead. You're so old when you were a kid, your phone number was seven.
Yeah, I don't get the joke. 35's not that old.
It is. It's crazy old. Anyone that's 35 should just, at this point, go on Social Security and just wait for death.
Okay, sounds good. I will do that, and you can host the podcast by yourself.
Perfect for 2 more weeks.
Yeah. Actually, wait, you're the 17th, right?
I am the 17th
Two
of
weeks,
May.
2 weeks and 3 days.
Fine, be that way. Just point that out for everyone.
Yep. Point out that I'm 17 days older than Matt.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TV Guys. I'm Matt,
I'm Brian.
and with our powers combined, we are
70? I don't know.
this is what happens when I put Brian on the spot without giving him any knowledge that I'm going to do that.
Yeah, here's the thing. I I'll admit I am not a great improviser. There's a reason that with most of those movies we used to make back in the day for youth group, that I was behind the camera. I'm a behind the camera kind of guy.
When you give Brian improvisation, his go-to is math. That's what he comes up with. 35 plus 35.
But we were
Got it.
just talking about ages for some
No.
reason.
No, you're good. Hey, speaking of ages, I don't think this actually has to do anything to do with ages. Okay, so this is a TV podcast, all right, but we can talk about movies because I'm sure a movie will pop up as we're talking about our stuff. We're talking about adapted shows, and so um, I saw or Angie messaged me. She had saw this fan made Back to the Future 4 trailer. And she's like, is this real? I'm like, no, that's not. But then I started thinking, I'm like, what? I'm like, I don't want to see a Back to the Future 4 because I think that they'd ruin it. But as my gears are turning, I'm like, wait, I actually have an idea that could be interesting that if they were going to do it, this is in my opinion, how they'd have to go. So, I mean, with any legacy movie, you take these older characters from the original, you surround them with a newer cast. Maybe they take a diminished role, or maybe they kind of change their role or something like that. So, you'd want to try and get, and I know he's dealing with Parkinson's, but it would be really cool to be able to get Michael J. Fox back. And I would say, make him like this recluse, and these newer generation, they somehow come across a time machine. I don't work out the details of that yet, or like a flux capacitor or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But they come across this and they have to seek out like the guy who knows about it, and they go to Marty where he's like this old eccentric guy, whatever. And the reason why he's hidden away and like why he's pulled himself away from the world is that 2015 came and went, and it was our 2015 and not the 2015 that we saw in Back to the Future 2. And it caused him to get so depressed thinking, what happened to that future that I saw? And instead, we got
Mm-hmm.
what we have. And so he's obsessed with, what did we change? What did we mess up? What did we
Yeah.
break? And so they team up with him as they go back into trying to figure out how they changed time and what they did with that. And I think there is a good hook. And I'm like, I would be interested in that. And you can even, again, have a similar callback to the 1955 Ronald Reagan joke, like, who's president in 1985? Ronald Reagan. So, you talk to someone in the past, like, well, who's president in 2016? And then they just kind of
Oh,
look at Marty, and Marty like shakes his head no, like, don't say anything. I think that would be a fun way to do it if they were going to do it. But even then, I still think they'd mess it up. But if they did, that's how I would do it.
one thing I have to say about your pitch. Christopher Lloyd is still alive, so are we even going to get a cameo from Doc Brown?
I would think that if they would do it, because you've seen Christopher Lloyd, and he's gotten really old. I mean, that didn't stop him from being in that movie Nobody last year, and apparently he's going to be in Mandalorian season 3 if he hasn't. I'm not caught up completely, but he's in this season of Mandalorian at some point. So I mean,
Well, that's why I said like a cameo.
I would say like CGI old like Doc back in the past. That would be actually, I think, how I would incorporate him if you got Christopher Lloyd. I don't know how, but I think that would be because I think Marty should step into the eccentric older
Yeah.
person role, which doesn't leave room for Doc to be there, but he would still be fun to have in it.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be expecting him to do more than just a little bit. I'm just thinking, like, if he's alive and as far as we know, on good terms with everybody and doesn't hate Back to the Future,
Yeah.
even like a flashback or something, maybe like, old Marty when he's finally telling the story of why he's so recluse, he gets a flashback to like Doc dying or something.
Yeah, easily could be.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's you get a free
Yeah.
movie pitch in your TV Guys episode.
Yeah.
So any movie producers who are listening, no, actually don't do that because again,
Yeah.
you'd screw it up. You'd mess it up.
Yeah.
The trilogy's perfect. Leave it alone.
Yeah, because like even though he'd be really old, that if Mr. Miyagi was still alive, he would have made at least a cameo in Cobra Kai.
I mean, they brought back like everyone in it.
Exactly.
Yeah. God rest your soul, Pat Morita. But speaking of Cobra Kai, so last time we actually did an episode like this. We talked about what are our favorite rebooted shows or shows that are adapted from previous works. And of course, Cobra Kai came up because Cobra Kai is a great show. Mm-hmm. Even if it's a lot of the same and it's losing a little bit of steam in my opinion, but that's a conversation we've had before. And so Cobra Kai, we talked about that, but we mentioned a number of shows, and here, you know what? You listened earlier and you came up with a list. Yep. So you've got a list. Just read off the list what we did last time because we're not going to mention any of those. We got new shows to talk about.
All right. So at our last one, which was over a year ago, was early on in our run of the podcast, we talked about The Mighty Ducks, Arrested Development, Fuller House, Animaniacs, Gilmore Girls, Better Call Saul, Girl Meets World, Star Trek, Joey, Once Upon a Time, Frasier, and Cobra Kai.
There you go. So I've got all these other shows, and some of them we can take a long time with. Some of them we can just bring up. But I've got plenty of shows, some classic and some that have come out since then. Mm-hmm. And sadly, we've already talked about Better Call Saul because I love to talk about Better Call Saul. But you know what? We'll talk about it in like 3 weeks. So make sure you're here for that.
Yep. I still haven't gone back and listened to my old predictions, unspoiled predictions. That'll be interesting to throw that in there.
I'd be like, man, I was so dumb, or I was a genius.
Well, I do know that I was right about one thing.
Ooh, now your curiosity is piqued. Now you have to come back.
Yeah, you see what one of my predictions was right on the money. So yeah.
There you go. Well, let's jump into some of our favorite reboots or adapted series. We've talked about this show a lot, especially when one of our guests, Mike, has been on this show. He loves this show, and he's brought it up a lot. Did you know that the TV show MASH was actually first a movie? That MASH came out as a movie, and then it was so successful that they created the TV show with Alan Alda. So I've never actually seen the movie. I think that there's actually a different cast in it. I'm sorry, like we kind of came together at the last minute of like, hey, now's the time that works for recording. And so I didn't prep this. This I would have looked up. But the TV show like came after the movie. And so, it had, I think, a brand new cast. But obviously, like this show is what people remember. They think about like these characters. No one I know talks about the movie, because the show is just so enduring. Yeah. And so I am a big fan of it. I had a roommate who loved MASH in college. Mm-hmm. And so he would always I'd walk into the room and have all these different MASH episodes playing. But for me, because we've talked about this a lot, but we've never really gone into depth because you haven't seen it. One of my favorite characters on that show, before we just move on, I love the main. It's like one of those shows that I love the protagonist more than any of the side cast, and that rarely happens with ensemble comedies. But Hawkeye is just such an awesome character. He's a little bit of Jim, where he's a prankster, and so that's one of the ways he keeps his sanity is like being sarcastic or joking, like against Frank or against David Hyde Pierce's character, whose name is completely escaping me right now. If you're listening, I'm sorry. It's falling out of my brain. It's been a long time since I've seen MASH. Yeah. He should, if we ever do a MASH episode, which I would be up for doing, I would need to rewatch some MASH, obviously. Yeah. But I think Mike should be on if we ever do a MASH
Yeah,
episode.
absolutely. And Mike, if you're listening, you want to do a MASH podcast, let us know. I'll have to watch some MASH. I won't be able to watch like the entire series, but I'll like give me like a top 10 or a top 5 or something, and I'll watch those.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that'd be great. So there you go. There's MASH, one of those great shows. It's a classic. If you haven't seen it, just check out even a couple episodes. Do yourself a favor. Just it's one of those shows that it's episodic, so it's not like you have to watch shows
Mhm.
beforehand. Like you can pop in at really any point in the series.
Yeah.
So
I'll return the favor and I'll talk about one that I really like that I really like that you haven't seen,
sure.
which is The Connors, which was when they brought back Roseanne and then kicked Roseanne off her show and then kept it going without her.
Yep.
You wouldn't think it would work. I know a lot of people are very mad about it, like, oh, you got rid of Roseanne, but it really works. And it's like this group of characters and this group of actors are so good at, like, on the one hand, there's the off the wall humor and like the zany stuff, but on the other hand, they're all dealing, like, it's all like their defense mechanism against like real hardships in life and like real tragedies. And like the big central theme of Roseanne and the Connors is this lower class family that is trying to struggle and they don't have any money, and like things happen, and alcoholism and all this serious stuff. And then within that, they joke around a lot, like especially the character of Jackie, who was Roseanne's sister, played by Laurie Metcalf. She is the one who has like the kooky sense of humor, but it's within like the darkest stuff. Like she makes all these jokes about her mom, and the joke punchline is usually, "My mom was so abusive to me, I wish she were dead. Isn't that funny?" And they somehow make it both funny and like serious at the same time.
Well, only Laurie Metcalf can pull that off.
It's
I
true.
have a lot of respect for her and for John Goodman. I think they're
Mhm.
both
Oh,
tremendous.
absolutely.
I love to see the stuff that they're in.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
I just have never got, like, I wasn't a Roseanne fan because I never watched it. My
Yeah.
mom, like, I knew that my mom hated Roseanne's voice,
Hmm.
and so she wouldn't even want it on because it would just grate on her.
Yeah.
But then, like, eventually I saw some episodes. I'm like, oh, this is a different show than I thought it was.
Hmm.
And I didn't hate it, but I think it was another one of those where it's like you missed the window to get in on Roseanne when it was still like popular. I was a little too old to really appreciate it since
Hmm.
time has moved on. Shows change, like the way that shows are created changes over time. So my
Yeah.
standards were different.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I won't just dwell on this too much just because you can't talk about it as much, but like John Goodman's character, especially, even back in the old Roseanne, it's perfect because in some ways he's kind of like the doofy dad, like, "Ooh, I just like to drink beer and be a goofy guy." But then also with like their struggle, sometimes he gets pushed to the breaking point. And I don't think he ever gets actually like abusive, violent. At one point, like Dan and Roseanne are having a fight that's so bad that he like flips the coffee table, and it gets like all of a sudden the tone shifts. And it's like, okay, this isn't a sitcom for this scene. This is like a heavy drama, and like he can play that just as well. He can play the "Hey, look, I'm a dad" kind of guy, and it's the same character. It's not like he's playing those two roles. They're both Dan Connor.
Yeah, yeah. John Goodman, he can do both.
Mm-hmm.
He's been in so many different roles. Like, there's other actors who've done a lot more varying roles, but like you watch him in Oh Brother Where Art Thou, and then you watch him in movie Flight, and then you watch him in The Connors, and then you hear him in Monsters Inc. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
and then you see him in Righteous Gemstones. It's like all different types. He can be villainous, he can be dopey, he can be,
He can be
what
Fred
have you.
Flintstone.
He can be Fred Flintstone. Yeah, do. There you go. That's for free.
Yeah.
I'm in a hotel, so I'm not quite as loud as I typically am. So if you're like, Matt's lacking some energy, it's not energy, it's volume.
I did notice that you weren't in a closet.
I'm not in a closet. I came out of the closet, so
Too easy. Too easy.
too easy. That's what they said. Never mind. All right, so anytime that I can talk about this show, I'm going to take advantage of it, and that's the show Andor. Now, we did a whole episode about it. I've brought it up since we did the episode but I was just blown away by how solid Andor is, because Andor, for those who don't know, and I think a lot of you do know, that was the sequel to Rogue One. It is in the Star Wars universe. I'm sorry, it's the prequel to Rogue One. It's in the Star Wars universe. It follows Cassian Andor. It was one of the main characters in Rogue One, as he kind of steps more into his role as a rebel. And so he's not a rebel at the beginning of the show. He's just looking for his sister. And then he kind of just circumstances transpire and he just gets involved in this mess. And so he's on the run. He's a wanted man. The entire show, though it's like 12 episodes, like probably once per episode, he's like, I can't stay here. I have to go. Like, you know, he's constantly moving. He's constantly on the run. It's a little bit of a trope in that way for him. But there's just really solid writing. And this is what the Star Wars universe needs. It needs more in-depth stories about characters where you know the universe they're living in, and maybe you can do some fan service to that universe they're living in, but you don't need a Skywalker to sell the show. And Andor showed us that if you give attention to the writing and if you give care and appreciation to the arcs, that you can have a tremendous show that enhances the Star Wars lore. And so I really loved being able to see, you know, like an Imperial prison. I think the Andy Serkis prison arc is really strong. I liked the heist in the 4th through 6th episode that they're planning, and the, like, you know, something's going to go wrong. Is you get that, you have that foreboding feeling for 3 whole episodes. You're like, they're not going to pull this off, and then you see how it goes wrong. You're like, how does he get out of here? And not to mention Stellan Skarsgård's character is just absolutely fantastic. It's really cool to see someone who's on the good side, but he is so morally compromised in his methods that it's like, you are just as bad as the rebels, but you feel like you need to use their weapons to fight. Not as bad as the rebels. You're as bad as the Empire, but you need to use their weapons to fight that war. And there's just such nuanced ideas in Andor. I loved it.
I like when shows aren't as simple as, hey, they're the good guys and they're the bad guys, and it's that simple. Shut up.
Yeah, it deserved Emmys. I don't think it won any, but it was nominated at least for them. So, or maybe Golden Globes. I don't remember. Maybe it was Emmys.
Yeah.
So check it out. If you haven't seen it, even if you're like, I don't like Star Wars, this is the most un-Star Warsy Star Wars show or Star Wars product at all. There's no Force, there's no lightsabers, there's no Jedi or dark side in this episode, or in these shows so far.
Yeah. I want to talk about a reboot that never actually happened, but I still think it counts a little bit. So
this is cheating, but I'll allow it.
So you know how I'm obsessed with all of these recap podcasts, and they keep popping up like weeds?
I do know that, yeah.
So there's a new one.
Of course,
I love the cheesy titles of these. Like, they're the best. It's called Living Lizzie, a Very Maguire podcast. And it's about Lizzie McGuire, and it's hosted by one of the bullies and then Jake Thomas, who played her little brother on the show. And, you know, in 2019, they were going to do a Lizzie McGuire reboot. And he's mentioned on several times, like, he said, oh, yeah, it's a character I played 20 years ago, and then once for 2 episodes 2 years ago that never actually made it. So they actually filmed 2 full episodes, and like, he can't talk about it and release it. They're just sitting in Disney archives that will never see the light of day again. But he keeps saying, like, well, I mean, I know the canonical version of what happened with my character, but speculation, let's see what this happens. And it's like, you can tell he just wants to reveal that. He wants to release those episodes so bad because you can tell he had a blast doing it. But we'll never know what actually happened with that before they shut it down.
Disney's lawyers, they're out to get you, man.
Yep. Instead,
that NDA you sign, they mean business.
Instead, they went on and made How I Met Your Father. No, I mean, that wasn't Disney, but it was Hilary Duff, and that one is fine. Like, I haven't seen season 2 yet, and I'm not really clamoring to.
Are they doing a season 2?
It's already out.
What?
Yeah, and I already got spoiled about another character return from How I Met Your Mother, but I haven't seen it yet.
I think I got spoiled on that character too, because I saw, like, they changed the artwork of the show to have a picture with that character and her, and I'm like, well, I mean, not like I'm caring so much, but
well, they had
watching it.
They had a different character with her in the first season, one of the main ones, and that was just like for a scene. So I'm guessing that what it is,
Yeah.
what it is again. And it's like it's not bad. And I watched the first one and I enjoyed it, but it's not like must see TV. Like I said, if a show's already out and I'm not upset that I haven't watched it yet, then that kind of shows you something.
Yeah. I did not find it funny. I haven't, I think like maybe there's been one or two jokes that I've laughed at in like the 7 episodes I've seen. It, if we're talking about reboots, like to me, this is a bad example, or this is an example of a bad reboot. It feels like it misses the mark on what made How I Met Your Mother great.
Mm-hmm.
And it trades out the humor and the characters, even though the characters have flaws. We've talked about Ted Mosby being
Oh yeah,
terrible as so many times, but even then, like you still have some very great characters of Marshall, and as flawed as he is, Barney Stinson is an intriguing character that you can't do nowadays. And Robin is an intriguing character as
mm-hmm.
well, and Lily, she's a bad person, and like if she was a real person, she kind of would suck. But
Mm-hmm.
she's a good character too. So it's
Yeah,
like you trade out these for just they're cardboard cutouts
yeah,
of like trope ideas. Like we've talked about these sort of character arcs, or like last week we did like the grumpy loner character,
yeah.
and it's like someone looked in a book of what are these sorts of like blueprints, and they took that and
Mm-hmm.
they gave it a name and nothing else,
Yeah.
no actual care. So
I agree with you
and
that.
and bad dialogue. All right,
Mm-hmm.
well, I'm done. I'm done ramping on it because I could tear it to shreds more, but I'm not as witty to do that right this moment. Let me real quick throw out a show that neither of us have seen, but I
Okay.
think we do need to mention it because this is a very popular show, and this was one of those that like the show was going, and it was based off a book series, and the book series couldn't keep up, and so they had to write a different ending because they just couldn't like they needed more seasons, and George R. R. Martin wasn't writing the books for it yet, and he wasn't getting those out. So that's obviously Game of Thrones. If
Mm-hmm.
you haven't caught up, so I've never watched Game of Thrones. I like knowing some of the content. I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to specifically expose myself to that. I don't really need to. It's like action fantasy porn, and like that's what these episodes are, and so I'm like nah, I'm okay. But it did have a major following. People loved it.
Mm-hmm.
They hated the final season, but a lot of people like loved it up to a certain point, and it was just a high-end television for them. So I thought we'd just throw that out, even if we have nothing specific to say on it, just
Yeah.
representation. There you go.
I feel like yeah, it's cultural in the zeitgeist. I feel like you have to have it mentioned. But same thing, like
Yeah.
and from all interpret all from all of what I've heard is that they did it very well.
Yeah, until the final season, but yeah,
Okay.
overall they did it really well.
Yeah.
That's what I heard.
Another
Here,
one. Oh, go ahead.
I know that I've got a lot. I've got like probably like 7 more
Well,
shows.
you can go again. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to do two at once because it's the same source material.
Okay.
So I'm surprised we didn't talk about this in the last episode that we did this, but Sherlock is a great show. The
Oh yeah.
BBC version with Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman
Yep.
is top notch. I know that's another one that has those complaints like the final season and people didn't like the stuff with the sister. I still found it very intriguing because I thought Benedict Cumberbatch's interpretation of the character was on point. It was that rough around the edges, that like jerky, cocky version of Holmes that we moved away from for a little bit and then had come back to starting in the 90s when like or late 90s or early 2000s when House came out. And that was the other
Yeah.
show I was going to bring up. But let's finish on Sherlock and then we can talk about House too,
Yeah.
because it's again the same thing.
Yeah. You're on a train there.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you think about Sherlock?
I didn't see all of Sherlock. I saw a lot of it, and it's been a little bit, so it's not fresh in my mind. But I
Yeah.
did think it was very well done in the fact that Sherlock it is a very unlikable character, in the fact that
Mhm.
he is such a jerk, and it's one of those guys like he's right, but he's such a jerk. But it keeps you watching because I typically don't like the jerk characters in shows, but
Yeah.
the mysteries and how they unfold was so compelling that it made it okay to watch, kind of for me.
Yeah. The show, I know there's some that like you know, when we had Mike on, we were talking about villains. We talked about Moriarty and that they were able to bring him in and they had a good Moriarty. I actually, that was my one, I don't know if I'd say complaint. I didn't like the modernization of Moriarty and some of his plans. I wish it was fresh in my mind to go into detail, but I just remember being rubbed wrong with Moriarty because like I thought the Jared Harris version of Moriarty in Sherlock Holmes 2 was fantastic. Heck, even the version of Moriarty from League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was better, in my opinion, than the Moriarty that we had. I have nothing against the actor who played him or his interpretation. I think the writing for him just wasn't quite on point, and he came off as unhinged versus like a little bit of like the Joker type more than like the calm and collected. And that's why I liked Jared Harris's interpretation and the writing for that. Because Jared Harris was the I'm in control, I'm 3 steps ahead of you, I'm a genius, and I can rub it in your face, but I'm not like maniacal, wring my hands together, laugh like a crazy man. So,
yeah, sorry.
No, you're good.
We're recording late at night, and now I'm yawning. I could have just edited that out, but I said I just had to announce.
There you go. You're just gonna leave it in. But I did on the other side to think that the interpretation of Mycroft was really good. Mycroft is Sherlock's brother, and so I did
I
like
that character, Alex Spinowit.
In some versions, like the Stephen Fry in the movies, he was fine. You know, I didn't have a problem with him. In the Enola Holmes movie, I didn't have a problem with him either. But I thought it was actually really strong representation of Mycroft in the Sherlock series.
Yeah, for sure. And then you said you were going to go right into House?
Yeah, right into House. So House is another one of those shows that is so good. But it's obviously, like we bring it up here because it is based on Sherlock Holmes. And we've talked about that before. Even the similarities of Holmes to House or Watson to Wilson as his best friend. And so like House, I feel like should get the credit for the resurgence of Sherlock Holmes' popularity because Hugh Laurie showed us how to portray this character well and how to walk that line between being a charismatic prick. That's what he was, is that you would hate him in real life. You'd hate to be around him. And you can see how he rubs people the wrong way, how he's self-destructive, but he has some really funny lines. He has this self-assured cockiness and he's right so much of the time that you're like, you kind of have to listen to him, even if you don't want to. Yeah. And it's a great character because of that. And I think that in having Wilson be the way that he was, it's a different interpretation than I've ever seen of Watson, where he is more adversarial to Sherlock, even though they're friends. That he provides a really strong like yin and yang of this is the moral side of things that you're not seeing. This is the social construct side of things that you are not abiding by. And the thing is, even though House acts like he won't listen to him, House does listen to Wilson. And Wilson is like the only person that he will let have that sort of feedback in his life and that he can even be vulnerable with. And it's such a strong relationship to see how much House is going to push Wilson and how much he pushes him away, and then to see how much Wilson takes or enables. So the show is just really strong in those relationships. And my favorite season is season 4 when they did like the whole everyone got fired. So then he has all these doctors coming in. I think that the show peaked during that season was my favorite. So
one more thing I'll say that I forgot that I was going to mention is another thing with House is like, they can't just be like, oh, I'm not going to, this guy's a jerk, I'm going to not listen to him. Because I mean, it's in that kind of setting, he's saving people's lives. So you have to listen to him because of that. Yeah.
No, the other relationship that is really strong in that, like, sure, Foreman is good, and Chase and Cameron, like those are all fine characters, but the Cuddy and House relationship is also really well done, of that power struggle and the power dynamic. And sure, it's a little bit of a will they won't they relationship, but it. Like that actually plays second fiddle, honestly, to the power struggle, because it is that where like Cuddy's like, I've got to run a hospital. And there are times that she gets the one up on House, and there's times House gets the one up on her. And there are times that House is right. And she's like, this sucks for the hospital, but you're right. And we do need to make sure that we back you on it. And just that is really well done most of the time in the show.
Okay, another one that we've talked about a lot. Sometimes we forget, at least I sometimes forget that it is an adaptation or a reboot in itself, is The Office. Because I've still never seen the British Office, but from all of these interviews I've seen with people with the cast of The Office and behind the scenes, like the original Office, at least within some circles, was so beloved back in the day. People like, you're going to reboot The Office in the U.S., that's going to go terribly, and like people were so protective over it. And of course now it's like one of the biggest sitcoms successes of America.
Yeah.
And
Ricky
even
Gervais became a really rich man from it.
Yeah. And I love that there was this joke in the new season of Ted Lasso where he's like, my wife loved The Office, so she wanted to move here. Didn't you mean Scranton, PA? He's like, oh, that's right. You all did a prequel over here for The Office.
That's right. Yep.
Ted Lasso was great. We're going to do a Ted Lasso season 3, guys, when it comes out.
We are. And if you're not watching Ted Lasso, it's good.
I'm
season
a little
3 is
behind.
not quite as good as season 2 and 1, in my opinion. Sorry to spoil that, but it's still solid. I'm not saying it's a bad show.
I'm 3 episodes in, so I think I'm 1 or 2 behind.
I think I'm caught up. The episode that's debuting tonight, I haven't seen.
Okay.
So
I will get caught up this weekend.
There you go.
And then, so I will get caught up. There's so many shows. Like I'm like 4 episodes behind of The Last of Us, which we're also doing an episode of. It's like kind of juggling. Like, okay, I gotta watch this show, then I gotta watch this show. I haven't even started The Mandalorian yet.
But like when we talk about reboots or adapted shows, honestly, it's like, is there a better show than The Office? Like there's so many people that are like, this is my favorite show, period.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not going along with that whole like, oh, it's cringy now. It's like, it was always cringy. That was the point. Yeah. It was always he spoke out of turn and was politically incorrect.
Yeah.
And it was never okay, the things that he was saying. It was pointing fun at that line of thinking. And that's always been what that is. And so I think The Office is great. We obviously love it, and we could and have talked about it ad nauseum. And I'm sure we'll come back to it again. I'm sure we'll do another Office episode sometime this year. Who knows?
Probably. I mean, we don't have any immediate plans because we have done The Office a bunch. But the fact is that we know that at least most of our listeners love The Office, and we love The Office. So it's like it's a slam dunk case.
Yeah, and everywhere you go and you're talking with people, like so many people will be like, oh, I can talk with you about The Office because we both have that shared interest. So many people have seen it. It's great.
So we just with life has been busy. I told you, like, my girlfriend hasn't seen The Office yet. We were watching it through the first time for her, and we're only partway through season 3. And so I'm kind of teasing her a little bit because we're at the point where Pam is with Roy and Jim is with Karen. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Maybe they're just going to stay like this. Maybe Jim and Pam aren't going to end up together. Just like that. And then on Thanksgiving, it was like a random episode came on TV, and like we were just in the same room with it. And then Pam said something about, oh yeah, like I'm engaged and I'm pregnant. And we're like, we should probably stop watching this right now. And then because like they didn't say that it was Jim, and so I was just teasing her again. I'm like, oh, it's probably Roy's baby.
It is. Yeah, they never confirmed it, but it is.
Yeah.
So before I talk about this next show, so over the weekend I did see the new Mario movie, and I gotta say, if you're a Mario fan, go see it. Like this is a movie that they clearly care about the source material, and so anything that you want to see from a Mario thing, like there's still a lot to do, but like there's all these little like checklists of like, okay, if it's a Mario movie, you have to have this and this and this and this, and especially the first one with what we're establishing. So it does a really good job with those Easter eggs. The story is fine. The story is there. I was entertained by it the whole way through. There's a lot of good lines. It's funny, etc. It's a great starting point. But I think the sequel needs to amp up the story, or it will be depressing. But overall, like it's really good. My kids loved it. So again, the Mario movie, it's strong so far. I really liked it. And the reason why I bring that Mario movie up is because we are now thankfully finally writing the track to be able to have actual good content that is based on video games. And so one of the most popular video game adaptations right now is The Last of Us. And so I'm not completely finished with it, but I still feel confident throwing it on this list because I've seen
Yeah.
enough of it to be like, this is a really strong show. And I'm not even someone who likes zombies.
No.
I'm not a zombie guy,
Me
but
either.
even that first episode, I'm like, I'm hooked on this. And each episode is I wouldn't say it gets better and better, but it's like there's really good episodes in there, and there's some really awesome stuff that happens. So it's another one of those that's like clearly they care about the source material, and clearly they care about telling a really strong story. Everyone involved. There's so many details that you can pick up. And again, as having never played the game, I don't see the Easter eggs. I don't know what the Easter eggs are, but I keep hearing references of people like, "Oh, this is from the game." I'm like, "That's awesome." I'm really glad that they're doing that. So we are
Yeah.
going to be talking about Last of Us coming up. But before we do that, Brian, did you have something to add about Last of Us?
Yeah. So I'm about 5 episodes, I think 5, maybe 6 episodes into The Last of Us, and I never even heard of this game. So I'm not a gamer at all. I got into Halo back in high school when all my friends were playing Halo, and my progression of video games kind of stopped there. So I'm like stunted like 20 years in the past video game wise. But I don't miss it. Like it's fine. So I think the show is done really well done. And like I said, I'm not a zombie guy either, but there's so much of the story and like just the bond between I don't know the characters' names,
Ellie
Joel
and
and
Joel.
Ellie and Joel is so fascinating with that. So I think that kind of draws me in. If it was just the zombie stuff, I would probably not be into it at
Yeah.
all.
There's a lot more we're going to talk about, but they really do write that relationship well of the tortured, guilt-ridden guy who is
Mhm.
trying to get redemption for letting his daughter die. Sorry, I mean that happens in the first 15 minutes of the first
Yeah.
episode. Plus, you kind of figure that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Is like he has that guilt that he's carrying with him, and then you have this girl who is like she grew up in an apocalypse. And so she's this hardened young woman who's seen
Hmm.
way more than she really should have ever had to, but that she still has this biting wit and this biting sarcasm that is getting Joel more and more out of his shell. And like it's an unlikely pairing, and it's a strange back and forth, but it
Hmm.
works, and it's really fascinating to
Yeah.
watch.
And you said like she grew up in like this apocalypse, so she missed out on so many different things that are like just normal everyday human kid stuff.
Yeah.
That kind of is a little bit parallel to Eleven from Stranger Things, who grew up in a lab and doesn't know basic human stuff either. So you get a little bit of hint of that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, and you had said that you hadn't seen heard of Last of Us before, and you talked to some people who have played it or some big video game people, and there's a lot who would say Last of Us is the best video game story that they've ever seen. And so it does make sense. It was right for television, and it sounds like they're pretty much instead of taking the story and adding a bunch, that they're taking the story
Mhm.
and just like not adding, changing. They are taking the story and they're adding things. Like the third episode with Nick Offerman
Mhm.
and his partner,
Yeah.
like that is, it sounds like is like a footnote in this game where it's like they're like, we need a whole episode about this. So we're going to take our time with this story.
Yeah.
And so, it's stuff like that, fleshing that out more.
It's also interesting to see some of this casting of people we knew from such different roles, and they're doing
Yeah.
nailing it. Like Nick Offerman, like this is Ron Swanson having this kind of serious role, or the stalker chick from Two and a Half Men having such a serious role.
Yeah. Or what's her name from Fringe? If you ever watch that show.
I haven't seen Fringe, but the only thing I know is I've heard a spoiler, just that I know who plays Ellie's mom, and do you know who that actress is?
No, I didn't realize Ellie's mom was going to be in it.
Oh, sorry.
Spoiler to everyone.
I thought you might have seen that.
No,
Oh,
not
sorry.
yet.
Well, she's played by Ashley Johnson, who is both the voice of Gretchen in Recess, and also was the little girl who was added at the end of Growing Pains.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah. All right. Let's see, pull up my list again. I'm bad about having it off the cuff. All right, so this one I'm not going to talk about a ton because I already told Matt we have to now do an episode of this, and we potentially have maybe 2 guests coming with us, which is in like about a week and a half. By the time you're listening to this, you will have already been able to watch the 30-year reunion of Power Rangers,
You will
which I'm
be able
stoked
to,
about. Yeah, I'm
and you'll
stoked
be
about
so
because
excited.
yeah, it's like this is just it's just like a fun reunion. Like with this kind of material, they're not going to take themselves too seriously. You can tell, like, because I'm a nerd and I've watched like a bunch of these Comic-Con panels of these things, and the cast of these shows, they all seem like really good guys, and they all seem like they're they're still good friends with each other. They like hanging out with each other, and so for them, it's just like, hey, let's just get together and do a thing again. Which is I'm having a blast watching it.
Yeah, there you go. Well, we are going to talk about it. It'll be fun. It'll be lighthearted. And if you aren't a Power Rangers fan, that's fine. It's okay. You're an adult now. You don't have to be.
Yeah. And it's like, and I'm not under any illusion this is going to be like, oh, this is going to be like high drama, Emmy winning. No, it's going to be cheesy and stupid, but it's going to be the right kind of cheesy and stupid for me.
Best case scenario, we get another Cobra Kai.
Okay, your expectations are a little too high.
I'm saying best case scenario. Like that is if everything like goes over perfectly and they have the right writing team, we're gonna have like that style. That's like the benchmark for it.
It does sound like, though, they're going to, in universe, kill off the character of Trini as a tribute to the actual actress Tui Trang who passed away like 20 years ago.
No
And so
way.
obviously she's not returning in there, but like from what I've seen of the preview, I think they're gonna like pay homage to her character by killing her character off. It'll be interesting to see if they do anything for Jason David Frank because I think they filmed it before he died,
Oh,
and I don't think he's in it still.
yeah.
So I don't
Yeah, I
know.
mean that was a year ago. It feels like it's been a long time, but really it's only been a year.
Has it already been a full year since he died?
Around that, yeah. Because
Hmm.
he was, I think it was like summer of last year. So not maybe not quite a year, but pretty close.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to talk about a show that when it came out was really popular, really on at the tip of people's tongue, and had a lot of fans. And then because it's like a limited run Netflix show, like you don't hear too much about it anymore. But that was Queen's Gambit, and that was actually based on a book, and so that is an adapted series. And Queen's Gambit follows the story of Beth Harmon, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, who voiced Princess Peach and Mario. I mean,
Huh.
that's not her only claim to fame, but she's been actually in a lot of stuff in the last few years. But she is this chess player that I believe she is one of the best chess players in the world. And so she's in this world of men. And so at the very beginning, at first, when she's trying to get into this, she's told like, oh, well, there's this women's league and men's league, and you're more comfortable playing with these women instead, all that sort of stuff. And she slowly proves that she's one of the best in the world, definitely one of the best in the country. And so, like, probably the other way around, the way I phrase that. But she ends up like I think even playing like this top chess player from Russia, and
Yeah.
so it's kind of her journey into proving herself, and then also she battles these personal demons as well that stemmed from her time in an orphanage as a child, and getting addicted to these pills, and just like a series of self-destructive choices and stuff like that. And so it's that personal drama mixed with the world of competitive chess that even if you're not a chess fan, they do a really good job of spelling that stuff out for you, and then also not needing to go too far into that for you to have to like enjoy it. Like even at the end of the show, if you're not don't know too much about chess, you still have appreciated the story that you watched.
Mm.
So that's on Netflix. If you haven't watched it, feel free to go watch it. It's still
I've
on
heard
there.
of it. Do you have to like know about chess to understand it?
No, because
Okay.
whatever things that they want you to know about, it's kind of like watching Ted Lasso for the soccer.
Okay.
That's
Gotcha.
that's the frame that you're
Yeah.
in, but you don't need to know really anything about soccer to understand what's going on.
Man, I don't know the answer to this, but I just knowing you, you're a big chess guy, aren't you?
I love chess. Yeah. It's been
I
a
knew
while
that.
since I've played, honestly. I probably am not nearly as good as I used to be. And even then, like chess is so complicated. I could beat like your average person, but if I ever was going to go in a tournament, I'd probably be done in the first round.
Gotcha.
I'm
So you
not
play against
that
me.
good. Yeah, there you
I've
go.
never played chess. I don't even know how to play chess.
There you go. Yeah, I think I could win.
Fair.
I would
Um,
hope so.
one that I haven't seen, and I'm kind of conflicted on it, is the Peacock revival of Fresh Prince. It's just called Bel Air
Yeah.
because it seems like it's just taking the premise of Fresh Prince and like emitting all of the 90s humor and just making it super like gritty and dramatic.
Hmm.
And I don't know how I feel about that because that kind of like Will Smith humor. Like at one point, he's like, "We're so rich, how come we can't afford a ceiling?" And he pan up, and you see all like the stage lights and everything. Like that, that kind of stuff was so built into the show, and you can still have all the great serious moments, like the "Why doesn't he want me, Uncle Phil?"
Hmm.
And I just don't see how you could have those characters one without the other. You take away the humor, it's not this. I mean, they're not trying to be the same show, but I don't get it.
I have to say, I feel like that humor is what made it stand out. Like, sure, at the time, you didn't have too many shows that were like Fresh Prince of Bel Air,
Mm-hmm.
and you didn't have like there still even wasn't all that much programming that featured a predominantly black cast too, and to have that be the market for anyone to watch, not just like we have a black cast that black people can watch a show, but it was like to really have a show aimed at the wider audience featuring a black predominant cast. Now you have plenty of shows that are like that, but you also have plenty of shows that are like this rebooted Fresh Prince, where there are these serious dramas about the struggles of a black family, and
Mm-hmm.
that like I've seen that show before, I've seen that movie before.
Yeah.
I think that if you would have a reboot now and you still had that humor, I think that that would be that draw that would bring you back to it versus this let's make it serious, because comedy can,
Mm-hmm.
like switching between comedy and drama is really really powerful when done right,
Exactly.
and I think that they still could do it.
Mm.
Instead it just to me becomes white noise in the background. We've seen
Yeah.
this before.
Well, I
It
don't know if I
doesn't.
necessarily agree. There was at that time there was definitely had been a number of black shows. It's coming off the heels of the Cosby Show, and then go back further. There was like Sanford and Son and Different Strokes. But I mean, I think Fresh Prince definitely led the way for Family Matters and Smart Guy and Sister Sister and all of these shows.
Yeah, I think Cosby Show was one of the first ones that was predominantly black cast that was not just aimed for black audiences. Because I think Sanford and Son was, I think Jefferson's was,
Hmm.
but Cosby Show was a more prime time show
Yeah,
that was groundbreaking in that way.
yeah. The only on the Cosby Show, I mean, we're going to do it for a second here. The only that I can remember, because I used to watch it a lot in the reruns, white recurring character that I can think of was I don't know his name. He's like the neighbor. He's played by Wallace Shawn.
Oh yeah, I don't remember him being in that, but like that rings a bell.
Yeah, and it was the difference because he was a little goofy, but he wasn't dumb. He wasn't like the Steve Urkel next door neighbor. He was just like a little more silly compared to Cliff and Claire, but he
Mhm.
was still like basically a guy came over and he just respected the Huxtables and he was a good guy. And you know, they didn't really have to talk about them being a black family that often. They were just a family.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was something that was really strong too. Is sure you can have episodes about that, but to really just say, um, black families are the exact same as other families. Like they're a family. Why is there a stigma about it? So
Exactly.
yeah. Um, yeah. So my next one would be. I'm surprised we didn't talk about this because I swear we talked about this show in the last one. But did we not talk about series of unfortunate events?
We there was two different episodes. So we did reboots was one episode we did, and a different episode we did was about adapted shows. I didn't listen to that one. So we have mentioned This is kind of a
Oh,
combination. I didn't watch that one.
you
Our
probably mentioned
definitions are kind of
Sherlock and
muddled.
House. Yeah, we probably watched Sherlock and House then in that one. I would imagine we talked about them. Okay, we did because I was certain we talked about series of unfortunate events. So okay, we can skip over that because we brought it up before. And then we can go very quickly on this one because we just had an episode about it about a month or two ago. And that was the Netflix show Wednesday. And so that is, of
Oh
course,
yeah.
a rebooted version of Addams Family.
Hmm.
And again, we talked about that a couple of episodes back, so that is still on our episode list. Feel free to go find it and
Yep.
listen to us go into depth about it. Long story
It's
short, it's solid, but it's still to me not a great representation of Addams Family itself.
it's Addams Family meets Harry Potter.
Yeah. Yep.
Hmm.
With a murder mystery thrown in.
And then when you said, "Oh, a Netflix show that we recently talked about," I thought you were going to talk about That 90s Show, which we also recently talked about as well. So you can hear
We
our
did.
thoughts on that one.
Yep. And again, that's long story short, that is a show that is better than I anticipated it would be, but still has room to grow.
Hmm. And although we've talked about some, I'm not going to talk about it that much, but there was also last year the Fraggle Rock reboot. And the only reason I bring it up is the other day I was listening to it's a panel interview of Steve Whitmire, who he used to be one of the Muppet performers. He actually was the one who took over for Kermit after Jim Henson passed away, and then he's the one who got fired by Disney in 2016. So he hasn't done anything with Disney or Henson in the past, like 7 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
But he was talking about like his experiences and everything. And it's a little sad because at one point he was saying like how he loved Fraggle Rock and he loved working on that. And he even mentioned like how I would have loved to have done Wembley again for the new thing they did. And he never really mentioned like exactly what went on, because it seems like he's on friendly terms with the other performers. But I think it's him and like the Henson family and him and Disney that really had the whatever beef they had.
That sucks because he did Kermit longer than Jim, didn't he? Right?
No, because it was close. Because Jim Jim Henson did Kermit all the way back in 1955. I mean, it was like local, not major,
Oh,
not like
sure.
major stardom at that point. But he did do Kermit longer. But he did him from 1990 to 2016. That's a long time to be Kermit the Frog.
Yeah,
And I
26
didn't,
years.
yeah. And even like for a while, I thought that he was like not on good terms with the performers, but just in the interviews, it seems like he is. And because in a while back they had an interview, a while back they had a documentary basically that was filmed by Frank Oz, when it was Frank Oz and a couple of the other there's five of them, like the old school Muppet performers who were still around, who were still alive, and it was just those five sitting around in chairs just telling old stories,
Yeah,
and he wasn't in there. So I figured, okay, the reason he's not in there, he must have had some sort of beef. And then later on I read that he was invited to participate and he just couldn't for scheduling reasons or something like that.
well, there you go.
Yep.
It was inevitable. Of course, we're going to hit on Muppets at some point.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, last show that I've got is a reboot that's brand new from this year, and it's actually on cable programming. You don't see too many of these shows anymore on cable programming that people tune into, but that is the Quantum Leap reboot. So I really liked Quantum Leap when I was younger. I watched it with my parents, and I love Scott Bakula. I think he's just one of those like classic TV actors that
Yeah,
you just like, you see him, you're like, it's Scott Bakula, he's great. When he shows up in Chuck, I'm like, hey, I love him.
that's Chuck's dad, right?
Yeah. So this new reboot is actually really handled really well. There also we get Ernie Hudson in it. He's part of the main cast because he's heading up the whole Quantum Leap division, and it's different. I like this extra thing that they added where it's not just the guy who's leaping and we see that. It is him having leapt, but we also see what's going on back at headquarters. And so like we didn't get that in the original Quantum Leap. And so like if you don't really know the story, it's there's this machine where someone can time travel, but the way that they time travel is they leap into the bodies of someone in the past. And then they are stuck there until they resolve some sort of issue or problem that's going on. And then once they resolve that problem, then they leap again to a new place. And so there is like a staff on standby in the like watching everything, and they have someone who can go in as a hologram. No one else will be able to see him but the person who's leaping. And so they'll be like, oh, I think that you need to help this person, or I think what you need to do is this, or it's, you know, we looked in the history books and this person did this. And so like they're trying to help direct them into the right choices. And so it's actually a really interesting dynamic to show the organization behind the leaping instead of just these self-contained stories.
Yeah.
And leap, 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 leap. So
That's interesting. I never seen Quantum Leap, but it's one of those shows that I think I would definitely get into if I had the chance and time to get into it.
yeah, I mean, it makes me want to watch the original, but the original kind of it was so anticlimactic, honestly, the way it ended. But the good news is this reboot kind of picks up where that left off. So it is still in universe. Mm-hmm. It's a reboot, but it's actually more like a sequel than it is a reboot. So
yeah. I've already exhausted my list. Do you have anything else?
That was it. I guess the one I just thought of that I'm watching right now too is there's a new Netflix show of a reality show called The Mole. And it was this 90s, like late 90s, early 2000s, back when like Survivor was popular and Big Brother and all that. But it was a show like that was kind of like this game show where everyone is competing for this money, and each week someone gets, they don't get voted out, but like they take the quiz to find out who is the traitor among them, the mole, who's trying to sabotage everything and take money out of the pot. And so they answer like this quiz, like 10-question quiz every single episode. And whoever does the worst on that quiz is executed, and they leave. Not actually in real life executed. That would be a very different show. So they
games.
It would be. And so then, you know, you get to the final three, and then it's revealed who was the mole the whole time, and then the winner of it gets all the cash. So it's a really interesting concept, and they did a reboot, and there's one season of it that just debuted like 4 months ago, 5 months ago, or something like that on Netflix. So
nice.
But Netflix does have 2 seasons of the Celebrity Mole, and
anyone notable?
Stephen Baldwin.
Okay.
Frank Corbin is actually, it's funny. Both of those guys are in both of the seasons that they have because they brought him back for the next season. And Dennis Rodman is in one of the seasons. Tracy, what's her name from Growing Pains?
Oh, Tracy Gold.
Tracy Gold, yeah. What's her name from the Cosby Show?
Which one?
The youngest daughter before Raven.
Oh, Keisha Knight Pulliam.
Yeah.
Rudy.
Yep. Keisha. Yep. She's on in that one. What else? There's other ones that I'm obviously forgetting, but yeah, it's good. I like it.
All right. Do you have anything else before we jump into trivia?
That is it.
All right. So last week we talked about grumpy loners, and I said which of the grumpy loners we talked about was originally a female character in the show's original conception, and that was Luke in Gilmore Girls. The diner owner was going to be a woman named Daisy, and then they realized, hey, we got a lot of women in this cast. Maybe we could make one of them a guy, and then they just made Daisy into Duke, and then Duke turned into Luke, and then Luke turned into like the main love interest for the whole series.
Duke turned into Luke.
Yeah.
That's just fun.
Apparently, when in like the first audition, because they forgot to change one of the lines on like the audition thing, so there was like a Duke line and a Luke line, and Scott Patterson didn't realize he was supposed to read both of them, and so he didn't prepare one of those lines because like, well, I'm Luke, not Duke. And it's like, oh no, yeah, that's also Luke. Like, oh,
that's you as well, you fool.
So this week, I have trivia. Unless you got one.
Okay, go ahead.
So I mentioned that there's going to be an upcoming for us, past for you, Power Rangers Reboot. Now, just within the series Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, there were 10 Rangers, 10 Power Rangers throughout the 3 seasons. How many of those 10 Rangers are confirmed to be returning in this reboot?
12.
12 out of 6. Or 12 out of 10, yes. There was only ever 6 at a time. That's where I got from 6.
Well, there you go. All right. Well, that is it for this episode. Next week I shouldn't even promo next week if I don't know what we're talking about next week. That would be stupid to do.
Yep.
Where's our pinned? I pinned the thing. Why is it not popping up?
I have it on a note. Next week we're talking about Cartoon Network shows.
Yeah, exactly. So next week, Cartoon Network, guys. I don't know about you, but I grew up on Cartoon Network.
So did I.
So we got some good shows to talk about. Stupid dog. And I was just telling my kids about the show Dexter's Laboratory and just telling them the concept. And I'm like, you guys would love it. This is a great show. So there's plenty more where that came from.
Is it not streaming anywhere for you to show them an episode?
I haven't even looked to see. I would be surprised if it's not streaming anywhere. But
it's probably somewhere on one of them.
Yeah. So make sure you're here, even if you're far away, even if you're in the city of Townsville. But until next time, be looking out for that. I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
I'm reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.